When the sun lowers toward the horizon and the sky turns black, when lines blur and things are not exactly what they seem, when the normal makes way for the strange and unexplained, it's time to question what is natural and what lies beyond our understanding. It's time to enter the edge of the unknown with your host, Mark Henry.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully this Sunday evening is finding you well. It is excellent here on the edge of the unknown, listening to us on the All One Broadcast Radio Network. Thanks for joining me this evening. I will be your moderator each week at Sunday from 8 to 10 for this Forum of the Fantastic. Great guests coming at you every Sunday, and this one is not to be missed as well. Great show coming up for you this week, and a happy guy. He's actually in the San Francisco Bay Area, so if you were actually watching the Packers 49ers game, he is a happy guy, as most of you know, as a former sportscaster here in town, who had to follow the Bills and the Sabres and a bunch of teams that I have tons of respect for and I do like. I'm a Saints fan. Saints beat the Feagles last night in another nail-biter. Two very close games, so you're going to be talking to two very happy guys from a football standpoint tonight. Want to hear from you throughout the evening, and I will give you the contact information before I introduce my excellent guest for tonight's show. But I want to remind everybody that 2014 is shaping up to be a very, very cool thing here on the Edge of the Unknown. Got a lot of cool guests coming up in the next few weeks. Some of them are still kind of TBA, but they will be in the month of January, beginning of February. We're just working out who's going to be on what Sunday. We're just jockeying that around because, unfortunately, scheduling shows like this such in as far in advance as I like to, 3 or 4 weeks out. Sometimes people want to flip-flop, or can I do this weekend, and can I shoot that out, and whatever. But next week, we've got a famous numerologist on, Elizabeth Summers. We're going to be talking about numbers, how they pertain to our lives, how they play into possibly predicting the future or predicting behaviors, habits, that sort of thing. That's going to be a fun show. And coming up, as I mentioned, later on in the month, a guy I've been trying to track down for a long time who finally got back to me this week. Psychic, Satanist, and occult expert Winter Lake is going to be on with me. He's excited to come on the show. Dr. Joyce Michael Flynn will also be on. She's going to be talking about near-death experiences, and she's a physician who helps folks who have had near-death experiences. Not only was she dead herself for over 20 minutes, and she'll talk about that when she comes on the show, but she has devised a way of helping those who have had near-death experiences get back on their feet, get back into life, and deal with what they saw. She doesn't deal so much in the fantastic voyage that people go on, but she does talk a lot about her personal experiences and how folks can deal with something that is very, very traumatic, obviously, on both the mind and body. And also, couple of guys that I've been kicking around with for quite some time. One of them has been on the show in the past when I was back on WECK. A couple of members from the Bigfoot Field Research Organization have expressed their interest in coming back on. So we're going to do a little cryptozoology as well as we move into 2014. So very excited on my end. I hope you're going to enjoy these shows. I know you will. And as always, remember, if you miss the show in any portion, you can always go to allonebroadcast.com, click on the on-demand button, find the Edge of the Unknown, and you can see all of the shows, download them, play them, stream them, do whatever you want with them, enjoy, and we'd love to have your interaction there. Also find us on iTunes, and remember, if you're not at home and want to catch us on your smartphone or your tablet, your iPod, or whatever it is that you've got, you can find us on the TuneIn app. Just search for A1B and you've got us there. 716-393-9523 is the phone number to get on board with us this evening. Again, you can find me on Facebook, Edge of the Unknown Radio Show. Email theedgeoftheunknown@gmail.com. All right, enough of all that jazz. We've got the housekeeping out of the way. It is my pleasure to introduce a very interesting guy. This actually came from something that I've been following for a while, and I've looked at his posts on his website. You can play along at home if you want to check it out. His name is Craig Weiler. Go to weilerpsiblog.wordpress.com and see all the interesting things that he's got to say. He is a psychic. He is someone who was interested in talking to other psychics about their lives, but somewhere along the line, something got a little bit more interesting that caught his eye, and he wanted to actually kind of, in a sense, take on the comments that others were making. If any of you are familiar with the TED controversy, we're going to be talking a lot about that tonight, as well as his new book. Technology, Entertainment, and Design was a website and a group of people who were blogging, talking about innovations, talking about their thoughts, and oh my goodness, somebody else got involved and said, no, you can't talk about that. And that's what we're going to talk about this evening, as well as I mentioned, Craig Weiler's new book, Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. You can find that on Kindle as an ebook. You can find it on Amazon.com, fresh off the press. That's the best way I'm going to introduce Craig, because I want him to talk a little bit more about himself. Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Mark, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about this. Your interest in the paranormal obviously didn't just happen overnight. Talk a little bit about your upbringing. You had to have noticed at some point that the feelings that you were having concerning psychic abilities, it stemmed from somewhere. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay. You might not know this. In fact, most people don't. But a lot of people who are already highly sensitive develop their psychic ability in childhood as a result of trauma, and I was in that category. Nothing really physical, but when you have a really difficult upbringing, one of the things that can happen if you're already highly sensitive is you become very, very tuned to the adults around you, and you develop your psychic ability as a means to make your life more normal. So this is something that sort of happened to me along the way as a kid, and so that kind of woke everything up for me. Then, from there, you basically live your life for a while, and then after I got married, I got back into it, and it turned out that, right about the time that I was getting interested in psychic ability was when the whole New Age thing totally went big. And because I live in the Bay Area, which is like ground zero for that whole New Age bit, I was heavily involved with it for a few years. And then from there, basically life for a while. And then about 6 years ago, I got into, I started blogging about it. I was on the Daily Cost. I blogged, started blogging a little bit on psychic stuff, and I got all this blowback from skeptics. And that was what really started me on the journey that I'm on now.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So from there, when I started blogging, I got curious. It's like the first they challenged me to a $1 million challenge from James Randi, something I'd never heard of. I had no idea. And so I started looking into that. And then they said there's no evidence for psychic ability. So I started looking into that. And the more I looked, the more I realized these guys don't know what they're talking about. And that was when I realized something is really strange here, because I have all these people saying all these things that are relatively easy to disprove. But there wasn't a lot of internet when in terms of information there at the time. So I started putting stuff on my blog, spreading some of the information, and then over the course of the last few years, all of that's completely snowballed. A lot of people have picked up on it.
And you have a very strong following there. I mean, obviously just from the folks that interact with comments, this is not just one of these fly-by-night forums where people might poke in, be a smartass for 15 minutes, and then go away. There's a lot of discussion going on at your website, at your blog.
Yeah, there is. I have developed it over the years. I'm a good writer, so that helped at first. But also, one of the things that I did was I started researching information on psychic people, and then they ended up contributing a lot to it because there is a lot that they don't know, and that there's a lot of information for psychic people that's relatively not spoken.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started talking about some of the issues, the psychological issues that I noticed that I was having, and I noticed that other people were having, that kind of opened up the floodgates, and that really got my blog going at first. And then all these controversies this year really got things taking off.
So when you talk about, some of these issues that were, getting you to take a little bit more notice, or maybe even spur you to action to talk a little bit more about it, to get others to talk about it, what are the kinds of things that were floating around out there that really, just said, the light bulb went over your head and said, all right, I'm in this, and we're gonna actually, I don't want to use the word battle, even though that's the title of your book, but we're gonna hit this head on.
That was part of it. I just kept hammering away at the facts. What did these skeptics would make these claims, and I'd say, okay, what are the facts here? And I'd go deeper and deeper and deeper, and constantly referring to what the skeptics wrote to find out if they really had answers. And that was one of the things that I discovered was that they really don't. They get a certain ways into the literature. They confirm their biases, and then they stop, and you see this over and over again. And then, as I'm researching this stuff, I'm running into other people's writings where they've run into the same thing. So it turned out that this was pretty common with skeptics to not really do much researching, just kind of go in a little ways, confirm their biases as soon as they found something they liked, and stop. But when I started pressing harder and harder to find out, how deep down this rabbit hole could you go? It turned out that the science is actually very robust. They've done, if you take something like this telepathy experiment that Gans felt,
mm-hmm.
and you look at how much data there is for that. Well, they've done like 2,000 some odd trials, 50 different researchers involved over the course of 30 years. It's been beat to death by the skeptics, and all the possible problems that they could have had have been pretty much handled. And so you look at this and you go, okay, this means that psychic ability has basically been proven. And then you compare that with what the skeptics do, and it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't even close. They have no idea what they're talking about. I ran into that a lot.
Would you say that, and I guess maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the question has to be asked, because I have skeptics on this show. I have, the believers. We talked about this when you first talked and had a phone conversation over a month ago. What do you think the biggest issue with the skeptic crowd is, to the point where they might do some things that kind of get out of hand? Perhaps in particular, the wiki blog or whatever they made about you, and we can talk a little bit about that, and your background that is not really from you, your words or anything, just seemed to come out of nowhere.
Well, you have first of all, about the skepticism. Skepticism itself is a reactionary mindset. It's analytical, it's logical, and logical thought, linear logical thought, is reactive. It's not proactive. There's no, for being proactive, you need creativity, innovation, inspiration, and those things. But for logical thought, that's reactionary. It's always, something has to happen first, and then it has to be analyzed. Mm-hmm. So when you have people that are focusing very heavily on the analytical, logical side, they tend to be reactive. It tends to be part of their emotional makeup. So some of these people go totally over the top. And that's, you mentioned rational wiki, and that's kind of what they do. You start to see this very strong ideologue behavior where they get stuck in one particular point of view and can't get out of it. And that's a result of being overly linear logical.
And that's not to say that all skeptics approach this that way. That's not to say all skeptics take that kind of thinking. There obviously are very smart skeptical people out there that are still interested in exploration and discussion, as opposed to those who are just out to, cause trouble or make fun of people or do whatever it is they want to do.
Well, that's exactly right. One of the things that I've discovered over the years in looking at skepticism was that skeptics are people and people are complicated. There isn't like one single type of skeptic. And whenever I engage somebody new, I have to suspend judgment about them for a little while until I find out which way they're going. Because you can't automatically assume that just because somebody's a skeptic that they're this total ideologue, blowhard person that's impervious to any new point of view. Some of them are relatively moderate, and for them, it's not believing in psychic ability is more a function of I don't have the data yet, rather than I'm not going to believe it no matter what.
Right. And I think, what would you, from your experience, the kinds of people, obviously, that you've been writing about or talking about, or that we're going to get into a little bit about this TED controversy, there's obviously a couple of different lines drawn in the sand with all of those people, with all of those different ways of thinking. They're mostly when you get into people who take skepticism very seriously, they tend to be more ideologically prone, which is to say they tend to be more stuck on their viewpoint and less open to new ones. It's certainly true with the crowd, that the skeptical crowd editing Wikipedia, the Rupert Sheldrake's biography, which I blogged about that several times, and in fact, that's still an ongoing issue. Right. Those people are really hardcore. And then when you dealt with TED, for example, the people at TED itself, I got they're sort of, kind of, and then with some of the commenters that were skeptical, those people, some were really hardcore, others not so much, and there's quite a range of skepticism. So we've mentioned it a couple of times now. Let's talk a little bit about TED. Obviously, you're more of an expert on this. Can you talk a little bit about what TED is, what they do, and, again, obviously what you just mentioned, how you got involved, and what that's evolved into?
Sure. Well, TED is first and foremost a nonprofit corporation that puts on conferences. And what they do is they try to get the most interesting, fascinating people out there who are doing things that I guess people at TED might consider to be amazing or fascinating, and have them talk about it in a very well-presented manner for about 20 minutes. That's about how long the talks are, in a way that's accessible to your average person. So no matter how much of a specialist the person is, they have to make their talks accessible to the ordinary crowd, and TED helps them with that. So they put on very good speeches, and then they also film them for the web, and they do an excellent job of that. So you're having these really well-produced, well-presented speeches, and it's a great format. TED's been really successful with it. They're embedded in the Huffington Post and in many other areas. And it's a really great idea, and people are fascinated with TED Talks. They come up with interesting stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. So they also have a website. Obviously, their website is TED.com, right? And that's where the controversy started. So, because what they did was they took down a talk by scientist Rupert Sheldrake on the grounds that it was pseudoscience. So, just a little history before that. Sure. First of all. Yeah, okay. So the thing that kicked everything off was there was a thread on the subthread for TED on Reddit. So Reddit had a subthread for TED, and there was a conference in Spain that was like super new agey. Now this is one of TED's independently produced ones, which means that it's not TED per se. They licensed it out to somebody else. So they had licensed out this conference in Spain. It was super new agey, And the skeptics on this Reddit thread went nuts. Oh my gosh, you're destroying the TED brand. This talk was awful. It was complete pseudoscience, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So the director for the independent programs at TED took note and said, you know what, we need to have some new rules put in. So they put together a list of new rules for their independently produced programs. And then shortly thereafterwards, there was a conference in London, and it was called Whitechapel, and they had several speakers, but the two we're concerned with here are Rupert Sheldrake and Graham Hancock. So Rupert Sheldrake gives his speech. His was on the science delusion, and the basic idea of his speech was that science operates according to a belief system associated with materialism. In other words, they basically take it for granted that the universe is material in nature, and they adjust their funding and their studies and everything according to this underlying principle of reality, underlying theory of reality. And he's saying, well, we need to question that. What if it isn't right? And so he had a list of 10 different assumptions that materialism makes to question, and that was the topic of his speech. And so he gives this speech, and then there were some complaints by skeptics on blogs. It turned out that TED was listening very closely to these particular skeptics. One of them was P.Z. Meyer, and the other one was Jerry Coyne. There are a couple of professors that blog occasionally on skeptical stuff, and they're well known within the skeptical community. So they took these people really seriously. Jerry Coyne wrote a letter to TED saying, you need to flag this talk and take it down, the one by Rupert Sheldrake. And so they did. Now that in itself was kind of strange because, you might want to talk to Rupert Sheldrake first before you take his video down, maybe get his side of it, But they didn't do that. They pulled the video down, and to their credit, they opened up a discussion about it. So they had a 2-day a blog comment discussion area, and that was when things started to go really nuts. I think they got over like 500 comments in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
I mean, So TED started to get heat immediately for this decision to take down Rupert Sheldrake's talk. Now, Rupert Sheldrake at this time is in India. He has no idea what's going on. So about 2 days go by. They get all these comments from people, and Ted's saying, you know what, we're going to listen to all these comments, and we take all of them very seriously. And the basic gist of the comments that were opposed to what TED was doing were basically along the lines of, you know what, leave the video up. We can think for ourselves. We don't necessarily agree with him, but we can think for ourselves, so don't take the video down. Perfectly sensible attitude of TED's viewers. So now we have his video taken down. A few days go by, and TED takes all these comments into account and then decides to leave his video down, and they take down another one, this one by writer, archaeologist Graham Hancock, and they add his name to it, and they put up a list of the reasons why they're taking these videos down, because they came up with several reasons why they thought that these videos were pseudoscience and not regular science. Now, if you looked at the reasons, and you can still see them on TED's website if you know where to go, you could pretty much make out that these were not really well thought out reasons. And sure enough, Rupert Sheldrake had a look at them. Graham Hancock had a look at them. They went through their videos point for point and went through all that information and absolutely destroyed all of Ted's objections to their videos, point for point. I mean, it was a really brutal takedown. They demonstrated that TED had given almost no thought to what they were doing. Now, I should mention, too, that TED was relying on the advice of a science advisory board, whose members they did not, the names of which they didn't disclose. Yeah.
Was that
so
before you continue on with that? I gotta jump in and just ask: was that by design, or was that just one of those kind of the same way the motion picture industry works, where you shove the movie under the door and then they come back, take out stuff, you keep shoving it under the door, and nobody knows who these people are, and they make all the decisions for that part of entertainment. Is that the same kind of thing?
I really don't know the inner workings of TED on this one. They simply didn't provide a lot of information for this. Their reasoning was that the reasoning for keeping them anonymous was they didn't want these people bothered by being inundated by a bunch of messaging.
Well, that makes sense.
Getting texts and possibly phone calls, and I think Ted was afraid of having them harassed or something like that. So, but the problem was that them being anonymous, it kind of led people to suspect that TED had loaded itself up with people who were relatively narrow-minded. Really, there's no way to prove it one way or another because we don't know who these people were, but, obviously there were many people who were suspicious of that.
Craig Weiler, my guest here this evening. If you want to check out his very cool blog, go to WeilerPsiblog.wordpress.com. He's also got a new book out, Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. You can find that both in a Kindle version. You can find that on Amazon.com. Check that out as well. And let's start right from there. Now what? So they're taking things down. They're giving what you would consider silly reasons to do so. Where does that leave both communities, from a skeptic side and from the side that doesn't really see it the same way that they do?
Well, that condition where both of them were taken down for these reasons didn't last long, because when both of the speakers objected, TED crossed out their original reasons. So TED acknowledged very quickly that their reasons were inadequate, but they still kept the videos offline. So they didn't concede. They didn't say, you know what, our bad, leave the videos up. We screwed up. We'll deal with this next time if it comes up. That would have been sensible. What they did was they left the videos down. They refused to back down, and they kept the discussions going. I don't know why they made this decision. It didn't really make any sense to me, but by leaving the videos down and by not having any reasons and by not disclosing who was, who the science board was, they put these speakers in a situation of not knowing what they were charged with and not knowing who was doing it. So it was very Kafkaesque from that standpoint. You don't know who your accuser is, and you don't know what you're accused of.
And in a lot of ways, that kind of goes against, the whole idea of, well, what it sounds like, honestly, is the internet tough guy. And I'm not pointing out anybody because I'm not going to speak to specific comments or that kind of thing. But in a lot of ways, it is where I can hide behind this, and I don't have to give my reasons. I can just say, you're full of beans, and that's all there is to it. But at the end of the day, when enough people do that, obviously a controversy does erupt, and that's really what's going on right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that... Ted basically, went down that route of not giving any reasons, but deciding to take action in a certain way, which is a very authoritarian manner of handling it. And that's when the controversy really started to get big. But it didn't really explode until they took down their conference for TEDx West Hollywood. Now, they had two speakers there. One of them was Dr. Larry Dawsey. He's an expert on alternative medicine. He's written several books on the subject, and most people know about his studies with twins because he's the one that initiated the whole twins research thing. So that was him all those years ago. And then another one was Russell Targ. He was in charge for a long time with the CIA Stargate remote viewing program.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Yeah, and he's also a laser pioneer. He was involved in the early research and made some significant developments in laser design. He's well known for that. So these are really sharp cookies, and they were in the TEDx West Hollywood program. And so when TED took down TEDx West Hollywood, you're basically looking at all of these speakers who are all basically all in the same group of challenging the existing idea about materialism. So the fundamental tension here is you have the mainstream idea that the universe is basically like a giant machine, and the alternate minority view that the universe is like a giant thought. It's an oversimplification of the thing, but that's an easy way to describe it. Is the universe is a machine versus the universe is a thought. And there's, if you look at the science, it doesn't specifically pick one or the other, which is why there's a controversy. And that underlies this whole TED thing. That there's this tension between these two theories of reality that tend to contradict one another, and the theory that consciousness is fundamental to reality, that theory is on the rise, and the theory that the universe is like this giant machine, that one's on the decline, but they're kind of meeting in the middle now, and you're getting all this tension, but you have people very much on one side and people very much on the other. So there's, kind of a blue versus red sort of thing going on.
Interesting. I just got an email into theedgeoftheunknown@gmail.com. None of this sounds personal. It sounds legit and something that people need to work out. Scientific findings change as evidence, and findings change every day. That's how it works. Just because someone thinks something and wants everyone to blindly accept it without anyone else talking about it doesn't make it the right thing to do. What's the real problem here? Tom, thanks for writing in. That is from Tom.
That's an easy one. The problem is that science, the mainstream science in particular, gets locked in to a certain point of view. And while we might have the picture that science is very objective, in reality, not so much. Scientists are people. And when you have people, particularly in large organizations, they're going to work very hard to preserve the status quo, because that's what large organizations do. They preserve their point of view, they preserve the status quo, and they don't want anything upsetting the apple cart. This is just people being people. And science has always fought new ideas. Always. Especially if something is relatively radical, is going to completely change how you do science. They fight it. So that's where this controversy is, and you've got people on both sides.
And I think that's interesting, because I think that's a healthy way to interact. But again, like we've been talking about for the beginning portion of the show, that instead of it being healthy talk and criticism or that sort of thing, it kind of blows up into this, I'm right, you're wrong, you're an idiot, no, you're an idiot, no, you're an idiot. And everybody kind of loses, what's that expression, you can't see the forest for the trees? That's really what it sounds like is going on here. Instead of, I don't want everybody to get together and sing Kumbaya. We have to, have a culture where we don't agree with everything, but we need to disagree in a way that both sides are going to eventually find the real reason.
Well, exactly. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned yet is that this particular controversy has been going on for, wait for it, 130 years. So this is not something new.
Right.
Yeah. The kind of people, the personality of the people who get positions of authority in science tend to be people who don't like to deal with stuff like parapsychology and in other consciousness-related research. They tend to push it out of the way. They tend to trivialize it and starve it for funding and discourage people from getting into these fields. It's been very effective, that process over the years. If you look into the early 1950s with the work of J.B. Rhine, he basically proved that psychic ability was real through statistical research, lab work. He did a marvelous job of it. His work was replicated by a lot of researchers, and that should have been the end of it. It should have basically proven it. But a reactionary element got in there. These are the people, the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, the James Randi Educational Foundation, all these people became fanatically opposed to moving in that direction. So science experienced this strong reactionary element that basically took control of the prevailing point of view and kept it from moving towards more consciousness-based research. And it stuck that way for a long time until the internet came along.
Craig Weiler, my guest here on the Edge of the Unknown. My name is Mark, taking you up until 10 o'clock tonight. You want to get on board? 716-393-9523 is the phone number. You can also reach me at theedgeoftheunknown@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook. Like the page. It's just Edge of the Unknown Radio Show. You can shoot me a message there as well. We'd love to hear from you. We've got an interesting comment in the chat room, but we're going to take a fast break. In the meantime, if you haven't checked out Craig's book, Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet, head over to Amazon.com and check that out right now. Maybe it's be a late Christmas gift or whatever holiday gift that you want to give to yourself. Check it out. Also, check out Craig's blog, WordPress.com site. It is just Weiler. I knew I was going to do that. Weiler, psiblog.wordpress.com. I can't even remember my name half the time, but go check that out. A lot of interesting comments going on there. We've got much more coming up here on the Edge of the Unknown, so don't anybody go nowhere. We've got plenty of talk still to come this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about the James Randi $1 Million Challenge, as well as some interesting webinars that Craig is going to be involved with. So all that and more. Your questions and comments coming up right after this. Hope everybody is having a wonderful evening, whether you're kicking your week off or you're wrapping it up. It is my pleasure to bring you some interesting paranormal talk here on the All One Broadcast Radio Network. We're back right after this. Everybody, stick around.
Looking for the best in vintage clothing? Look no further than Vintage Wears Boutique at vintagewearsboutique.com. Women's classic jackets and coats, skirts and dresses, all just a click away. Check out the latest inventory online for pictures, sizing, and more. Have a particular item in mind you can't find anywhere else? Go to vintagewearsboutique.com. Still stumped? Try their personal shopper service and let them do the work. Find the best in vintage clothing at vintagewearsboutique.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us at vintagewears_ on Twitter, and see us on Pinterest and Tumblr. vintagewearsboutique.com, where the past is your style.
Hey there, A1B listeners. This is Medium Julie MacDonald, host of Medium at Large. Join me Wednesday nights on All One Broadcast, where together with my guests, we journey into the many different worlds and expressions of spirit. Through mediumship, astrology, nature, indigenous technologies, alternate universes, otherworldly messengers, and much, much more. You just never know where we're going to land. So strap your seatbelts and tune in to Medium at Large on A1B. Listen, it's the only place to be.
Mark Henry here for the cool cats at Natural Vapors, with 2 locations in Western New York and online at naturalvaporsbuffalo.com. Natural Vapors offers a variety of e-cigarettes and accessories for those making the jump from analog smokes. Whether you're new to vaping or you're a seasoned user, Natural Vapors has what you're looking for. First time vaping? Visit with their dedicated staff and they'll set you up with a starter kit that is customized for you. For the experienced vapers, they carry the latest smooth batteries and tanks by Kanger. And if you're looking for mods, they've got Innokin mods, custom wraps, and much, much more. Natural Vapors offers dozens of e-liquids to fit your flavor fancy, as well as wholesale e-liquids. And hey, all liquids are made in-house from USA FDA-approved ingredients. Don't take my word for it. Check them out yourself. 2 locations in Western New York, Southgate Plaza in West Seneca, and also in the Union Consumer Square Plaza in Cheektowaga. Not from around here or just don't want to leave the house? Order online at naturalvaporsbuffalo.com and have everything delivered right to your door wherever you are. That's Natural Vapors and naturalvaporsbuffalo.com. Tell them Mark Henry sent you.
Without chupacabras, there's nothing to talk about. Back to the edge of the unknown.
We're rolling along here on a gorgeous Sunday night in Western New York, right outside of the great city of Buffalo, the Nickel City. We've got like a million different nicknames for this city, and I don't know why. Yeah, we're on the rebound. We're coming back, everybody. Buffalo's a great town. If you've never been here, I highly suggest you come down and check it out sometime. Great sports, great architecture, great museums, great people, great food, the whole nine. There's my little PSA for the city and area of Western New York, city of Buffalo and area of Western New York. But you have a great guest on coming from the other side of the country. We're going to get right back with Craig Weiler in just one second. I want to remind everybody, next week up on this here radio program, numerologist Elizabeth Summers. We're going to delve into numbers. We've never had a numerologist on. We've had astrologers on. Actually, we just had a friend of mine, personal friend, Cassandra Joan Butler. We talked astrology for an evening not too long ago. Very interesting show. But we haven't really delved into the specifics of numbers, how they play out in our lives. Numbers mean a lot to me for a lot of different reasons. I'm not so sure that we can predict the future with them, but I think they have a lot to say about who we are and where we are in this plane of existence that we have. So check that out next week. Numerologist Elizabeth Summers. Back to my guest at hand, his book, Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. Craig Weiler coming to you from the great city of San Francisco. It's wonderful. It's a little bit warmer there, as he told me before we started the show, and at least it's not too cold for you. It's about to get really, really cold here. Craig, thanks again for joining me tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, one of the funniest things before we get to the show, when I used to do PR for an Arena League football team, and you had one in California in San Jose, and I always liked that trip, not always, but when I did like that trip, taking that ride down Highway 1, I think it would be 95 degrees in San Jose. You'd get to the bay, and it would be 48, and I was like, this is amazing. How the hell can that actually happen? But shows you what kind of an interesting world we live in.
Yeah, there can be some real temperature differences between various areas.
It was awesome. But anyway, so I'm going to shut up and get back to some comments here. We've got a couple of emails in, and I wanted to scroll back up here because this is a cool question. Holy cats, this has been going off for the last few minutes. It's hard to actually check out the live chat room while we were having an interesting interview with a guest. But Dave writes in, does science define religion, or does religion define science? And how does that pertain to the theory of evolution? Is that something that you can address?
No.
Okay, we're going to move on.
That's just not my field.
Well, maybe you know what I could do is I could kind of pull that away from that and talk a little bit about the scientific approach to things, because you talked at length about, you know, folks being so hardcore and though this is the way it is, this is science, this is always the way it's going to be, until something comes up where they have to question it. Shouldn't they always be questioning everything, including religion, including the way that we think, the way that we accept things? Because at the end of the day, we are all kind of machines, and we all have chemicals that are, you know, firing synapses. At the end of the day, it does have to have a scientific explanation why we are who we are and why we do what we do.
Well, yeah, we rely on scientific explanations, and one of the issues with scientific explanations is that you've got these two realms that you're dealing with, and it can be really challenging for people, particularly when you're talking about people who spend their entire lives dealing with stuff, to suddenly have to switch gears and say, now we're dealing with the other side of this, which is consciousness. Now, here's the problem that you have, that consciousness is completely immaterial. When we have a thought, that is to say, if we think of an apple, there are no apple neurons. There is no collection of neurons that says this is an apple. You don't have apple atoms, apple subatomic particles. It's a collection. It's not a thing. An apple is a thought that we create out of somewhere in correlation with what's going on in our brains, but nobody knows, has the slightest idea. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to get there. How do you get from something material to something immaterial like a thought? Nobody knows. There's nothing there. You get right up to the edge of this stuff. They can look in the brain. They can say, well, this thought looks, or this brain pattern looks like it corresponds to this thinking, but it's all correlation. It's not causation. You can't say for sure that the brain is causing this thought, because you could take this the other way and you could say, well, what if it's the thought causing what's happening in the brain? You could go either direction. The data that we have doesn't tell you which direction it's going. It could be the thought making the brain activity, or the brain activity making the thought, or there could be some interrelation between them where it's not quite one and not quite the other. We don't know, because there's no way to measure a thought, because it's completely immaterial. It's not something that science can grab hold of and say, this is a thing.
It's interesting, and I want to follow with that, because I do have a question from Mark in the live chat room that I want to get to, because I just told him that I would ask, going back to TED. But I just listened to a podcast from a local skeptic group here that was talking about near-death experience, and the gentleman that they had on had one about 25 years ago. He was clinically dead a number of times throughout a night after an accident, and one of the things that they brought up was the scientific testing. Actually, it was a government test where they were putting guys into one of those, I don't even know what the heck you call them, where you put them in and you spin them around and around and around. I'm terrible. I don't even know what that is. But they were talking about how they were basing their research and their findings on the fact that they were experiencing the same sort of thing someone might have if they were having a near-death experience. Interesting thought, interesting way to look at things, nothing conclusive, but at least it was a legit scientific investigation, rather than just saying, nope, that's not the way it is and it just works the other way and you're wrong.
Well, I'm not an expert on near-death experience research. Sure. However, I am aware of the skeptical arguments. The kinds of objections that the skeptics are making were disproved long ago. So this idea of hypoxia, lack of oxygen, that, centrifuges and stuff.
That's it. Okay, centrifuge. Dave, you guys got me there. It's a centrifuge. I'm terrible.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. But anyway, these experiences that people have don't match what people experience in a near-death experience. They're very different. In fact, there have been pilots that have experienced both. So the hypoxia versus the near-death experience, they say there's nothing. They're not even closely. There's nothing similar about these. They're much different experiences. The near-death experience itself is an incredibly vivid, more real than real type of experience. That's how people relate it. I've never had one myself, and really, I hope I don't.
Yeah, right. I'll join you there. That's fine. That's fine by me.
Yeah, but there is no scenario where a brain becomes damaged and produces an experience as a result of that becomes more real than real. Anytime you take a materialist brain equals mind approach, the experiences that you have should diminish as the brain diminishes. They should not be getting bigger and stronger. Yet that's what you have in a near-death experience, where you have, little to no brain activity, and then you have this totally full-blown, huge experience that nobody has in their regular life. So that it's really hard to take a materialistic approach and apply it to that research because it doesn't fit.
Well, that could probably apply to any number of different things too, not just near-death experiences, but that happened to be, something that I knew they were talking about last night. So as I mentioned, I wanted to get back real quick before we move totally away from TED. I'm sure we're going to touch on it again later in the evening. Mark in the live chat room asked about TEDx West Hollywood. I'm wondering if Craig has an update on whether or not Suzanne got her money back after TED pulled the name from her conference. Can you talk a little bit about that, or is that something you're comfortable dealing with?
Oh, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Sure, please do.
And Suzanne would be happy that I was talking about it. So first of all, the answer is no. TED has not given her any compensation for what they did. Really briefly, that particular part of the story is that her conference was set to go. It was 2 weeks before the conference, and TED pulled the plug on her. So this meant that she lost, I think, 4 of her speakers. She lost her venue. She was going to hold the program in the West Hollywood Library, a beautiful space, and she lost the space, lost some of her speakers, and she had to put this program on. And she only had 2 weeks to pull something together. So she spent about $30,000 of her own money and found the Vortex Dome. It's in the Los Angeles area. It's actually on one of the studio lots. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name of the place, but then advertised the heck out of it for about a week, and then she managed to fill up the space, but it was only like about 100 people or so. It's not a very big spot, and then also put the whole production. She filmed it so that it's available on Vimeo. And actually, I was down there. I gave a speech there. You can actually see my speech with the others. And the name of her program was "Brother, Can You Spare a Paradigm?"
Nice.
Yeah. So she was just about ready. Everything was set, and then TED came in and claimed a copyright infringement on the account that she had with Vimeo. And so 2 days before this whole thing is going to go on, she loses her streaming service. She has to apply for a new account under a different name and all that kind of thing. It was just like this real petty thing that TED did to her. And so she tried, after all the dust had settled, to see about getting some money from TED, and they just stonewalled her. They're not, it's like, go ahead, sue us. That was basically their attitude.
Wow. So, they just cut loose in space. Get out of here, forget it, and no option of redoing it, changing a name, changing this, or doing it someplace else. It was just see you later, goodbye?
Pretty much, yeah. They decided her program was not up to their standards. They would not give her any reasons why. Huh. Yeah, well, it's the same thing they did with the other 2 speakers, Sheldrake and Hancock. They didn't give, when all the dust settled, there weren't any reasons for taking down the videos. It was just, we don't like them, we don't think they're to our standards, without any reasons. And so that was kind of where it all got left. They just, they cut her loose and didn't compensate her for anything. They had some negotiations, but those all broke down.
When things like this happen, and again, my guest this evening, if you're just joining the show, Craig Weiler, check out his website, weilerpsiblog.wordpress.com. It's spelled WEILERPSIBLOG if you're looking for it, but weilerpsiblog.wordpress.com. When people hear about this sort of thing, do they tend to start moving away from TED and saying, you know what, I really don't want to even be a part of this anymore if this is what's going to happen? Because quite frankly, somebody could invest a whole lot of time, a whole lot of money, and get the same kind of treatment. Why would they bother knowing that somebody might pull the rug out from under them?
You mean why would anybody be an independent producer for TED?
Yeah, why would they, even taking that chance that somebody might say, well, we don't like what you're saying, so forget it, and you're out a whole bunch of time, effort, and possibly money.
I really don't know. That's a part of it that I really can't speak to. Obviously, if somebody was even slightly going towards the New Age side, you would never approach TED. You don't want to take a chance of going through a bunch of negotiations only to be turned down flat.
Right.
But if you're not going along that direction, then I suppose as long as you're not pushing their buttons, you're fine.
One of the things that I'm going to switch gears here. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and I know I mentioned when I first reached out, and something that has always been fascinating to me, and I did mention to you earlier, the James Randi $1 Million Challenge. I've actually reached out to those folks to come on the show a couple of times over the last 4.5 years, and have never gotten a response back, just to get the ins and outs of it. I know what they're trying to do, and I know that there's a number of controversies around it, but people still really fall back on that as hey, if you're a psychic, come prove it, you have to take the James Randi Challenge, as if that is some kind of, or rather the litmus test. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the James Randi Challenge and what you know about it as far as people actually trying to legitimately take it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm probably as much of an expert on this thing as anybody. So just so that your viewers understand, that the James Randi Educational Foundation has a $1 Million Challenge for psychics. What you have to do is apply for the challenge, and then you go through a preliminary challenge, and then if you pass that, you go on to their main challenge, and if you pass that one, then you can collect the $1 million, or so this whole thing is supposed to be. Now, what the skeptics argue is that since nobody has passed the challenge, and nobody has, this challenge has been given, well, I don't know exactly how many times, probably 30 or 40 by this point. It's hard to say, because the record keeping is atrocious. But of the people that have taken the challenge, nobody's passed. And so skeptics argue that this means that there's no psychic ability. So if you want to address that point, then you say, well, look at the scientific research, because the scientific research is much different from this. These challenges are a one-off. They're different every time. They force people with psychic abilities to try and construct a scientific test, which is completely outside of their expertise. So you start with these problems, and then you work out from there. The people that are actually creating the tests are not parapsychologists. They are not people who have experience in the field. And the James Randi Foundation doesn't rely on people with a good background in this to do it. Or they will use people that are known to be very much on the skeptical side. There is no objectivity associated with this challenge. So when you start digging in deeper, you find all the problems associated with people who are stuck on really strongly on one point of view, trying to do a test to prove something that they really don't want to see proven. So there's a few things that the Randi Challenge does that are really totally off base with good parapsychological research. The first of these is that the challenge itself is really short. They'll have maybe at the most like 10 or 20 trials, so you only get 10 or 20 shots at proving yourself. This is not enough. It's not how normal parapsychological research is done. And in fact, one challenge that I looked into, a guy named Pavel Zyberov, I think he's from Poland, he spent 2 years trying to get his challenge done. He got almost through there. They were going to do 100 trials of a very simple experiment. Either you get it or you don't. So they had this all set up with 100 trials, and James Randi or his staff, we're not sure which, switched this down to 20. So this does two things. First of all, it makes the challenge much harder because you still have to beat certain odds to do this. And the other thing is that it makes it much harder psychologically to accomplish it because every single trial has all this pressure on it, which is a really bad idea if you want to actually prove psychic ability exists. There's generally in their challenges, they're very good at having controls, but they really suck at doing anything that promotes the existence of psychic ability. To put this another way, you can, if you want to test a seed to find out whether it will grow, if you put the seed on a shelf and look at it, you have perfect controls for your experiment, but it will fail every time. Because you can see the seed, you know nothing, there's no funny business with it. You can look at it on the shelf, but nothing happens because you haven't put it in dirt and you haven't given it water. And this is kind of like, this is the same principle with psychic ability. You have to basically, to use an analogy, put it in the earth and give it water. You have to do things that enhance psychic ability or that give people a fighting chance of having their abilities show up, because it is tricky. And the James Randi people don't do that. Whether you're dealing with the scientists, usually they use Richard Weissman, who has a history of not having psychic experiments work. He's technically a parapsychologist. He knows the research. He's relatively competent with the field, but when he does experiments, there tends to be stuff about them that gets somewhat controversial. And do you have any questions on this?
Actually, I just actually got an email in from P, who writes in quite a lot. Speaking of the James Randi challenge, it's hard to discern what's actually happening because psychics, if they can't meet standards, say they fall back on it's hard to become psychically strong because of the room, the test parameters, and so on. While I don't agree with the way the challenge is set up, I understand it's not perfect. Isn't it at least a starting point that should not be brushed off and should at least be accepted for what it is rather than the challenge and sideshow Randi has made it? Thanks, Mark. By the way, I'm a male. Mystery solved. I appreciate that, P. I've been wondering for 4 years if male or P was a male or a female. So I've got that. Anything to say about that? Interesting comment.
Unfortunately, the challenge is it's a wash. It's meaningless. The way they have this done doesn't prove anything. It's not a good test of people's abilities. So basically, it's a media circus for skeptics, and that's really its entire function. It doesn't. They're not doing any real science there. What you need for science, if you wanted to have the test have any meaning whatsoever, you would need to document everything that's done. You need to have objective people who are familiar with the science come in and help design the test. And another thing is you need to design the test so that it's not too hard. That's one of the complaints about the challenge. For even the preliminary challenge, you have to meet odds of 1,000 to 1. This is possibly doable, but you need a lot of repetition to get to that point, given the vagaries of psychic ability. Mm-hmm. And they never give them that opportunity. They cut it off at a very small amount, so that you'd have to just like totally nail it from start to finish. And people can seldom do that under pressure situations. So you've got that part, and then you've got the other part where it's not documented. They're all one-offs. And so what you end up with is a situation where people are being tested once the test is really hard. The test has questionable characteristics about it, and so you don't really learn anything from it because you don't get enough data to really draw any conclusions.
My guest this evening here on the Edge of the Unknown is Mr. Craig Weiler. If you want to get on board, we're talking right now about the James Randi $1 Million Challenge. 716-393-9523, and that's the phone number, theedgeoftheunknown@gmail.com. You can get on board. We have some other emails to get to. We have another comment here from the chat room that I want to get to before we take a break. This is interesting. Given that pseudo-skeptics regularly advocate the use of fraud conspiracies that they call hoaxes in order to advance their agenda, like the Project Alpha conspiracy, why would any psychics ever trust them in the first place?
Well, two reasons. The psychics that I've run into who tried to do the challenge, they were all very stubborn people. Mm-hmm. They thought they could do it. They just very much believed in themselves and didn't really realize how bad this was. And there were two that I've talked to that explained this in some detail to me. One of them was Patricia Putt. She's a medium, and she took the challenge and failed it completely. 0 for 10, no success at all. Then she had a follow-up challenge with another person and failed that as well. She just didn't know what she was getting into and didn't realize how hard this would be. And they messed with her. It's like normally mediums speak, and they forced her to write stuff down, which changes the part of your brain that you're using. They had her, the people that she was supposed to read, they were all really close in age, and they were all students, so it would be hard for them to differentiate the information she was giving them because they were all too similar. Crap like that. And the other guy, he was just stubborn. Both of them got good advice along the way that said, you're wasting your time. Both of them were told this flat out by people who knew the Randy's challenge well, and they just simply ignored him. They ignored the advice and went forward. They were just stubborn.
We're going to take a fast break here on the Edge of the Unknown. When we get back, we're going to delve into my guest's new book, Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. You can check that out at Amazon.com. I want to talk a little bit about that. We've got more comments coming in on the live chat room, and I've got more from the email account here. Nothing on Facebook tonight. A little quiet there, but that's quite all right. We've got plenty to talk about without Facebook. Who needs it anyway, right? That's my theory for the evening until somebody actually does send me a comment there, and obviously that probably will right now. Thanks for joining me here on a Sunday evening, wherever you are. Hopefully it's a little bit warmer than it is in Western New York. And if you are in this area, if you're in the northern Midwest where some of my friends are in the Chicago area, hunker down. It's going to get cold. But hey, we're going to keep it rolling here for you on the Edge of the Unknown. We're going to be back right after this quick break. More from Craig Weiler. Check out his website, WeilerPsiblog.wordpress.com. Weiler spelled W-E-I-L-E-R. Go check it out. Don't forget, numerologist Elizabeth Summers, my guest next week. We're back right after this. Stick around, everybody. Appreciate you hanging out with me on the Edge.
Looking for the best in vintage clothing? Look no further than Vintage Wears Boutique at VintageWearsBoutique.com. Women's classic jackets and coats, skirts and dresses, all just a click away. Check out the latest inventory online for pictures, sizing, and more. Have a particular item in mind you can't find anywhere else? Go to VintageWearsBoutique.com. Still stumped? Try their personal shopper service and let them do the work. Find the best in vintage clothing at VintageWearsBoutique.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us at VintageWears_ on Twitter, and see us on Pinterest and Tumblr. VintageWearsBoutique.com, where the past is your style.
Hey there, A1B listeners. This is Medium Julie MacDonald, host of Medium at Large. Join me Wednesday nights on All One Broadcast, where together with my guests, we journey into the many different worlds and expressions of spirit. Through mediumship, astrology, nature, indigenous technologies, alternate universes, otherworldly messengers, and much, much more. You just never know where we're going to land. So strap your seatbelts and tune in to Medium at Large. on A1B. Listen, it's the only place to be.
Mark Henry here for the cool cats at Natural Vapors, with 2 locations in Western New York and online at naturalvaporsbuffalo.com. Natural Vapors offers a variety of e-cigarettes and accessories for those making the jump from analog smokes. Whether you're new to vaping or you're a seasoned user, Natural Vapors has what you're looking for. First-time vaping? Visit with their dedicated staff and they'll set you up with a starter kit that is customized for you. For the experienced vapors, they carry the latest smooth batteries and tanks by Kanger. And if you're looking for mods, they've got Innokin mods, custom wraps, and much, much more. Natural Vapors offers dozens of e-liquids to fit your flavor fancy, as well as wholesale e-liquids. And hey, all liquids are made in-house from USA FDA-approved ingredients. Don't take my word for it. Check them out yourself. 2 locations in Western New York, Southgate Plaza in West Seneca, and also in the Union Consumer Square Plaza in Cheektowaga. Not from around here or just don't want to leave the house? Order online at naturalvaporsbuffalo.com and have everything delivered right to your door wherever you are. That's Natural Vapors and naturalvaporsbuffalo.com. Tell them Mark Henry sent you. Always one technical snafu per evening. I just played the wrong break. Whoops. Oh well. Medium Julie MacDonald gets extra publicity. She's got a great show on Wednesday nights right here on the All One Broadcast Radio Network. Check it out. Julie is really cool. She's got a really fun show. And again, if you miss any of the shows on All One Broadcast, if you're not a regular listener, go to the on-demand section. This is the coolest way to get everything. This show, as soon as we are done here wrapping things up tonight, I will have it up as fast as we can get it there. You can always find us on iTunes as well, but the on-demand page is awesome. It's in a lot of ways the only way I can keep up with all the other great shows that we have on the air here, because we've got too many and there's too much going on in my life that I can't tune in every single night or every single time that someone's on. But some really cool news coming down the pike. When I know more about it, I will talk a little bit more about it. But some really cool shows that will be joining the ones that we already have on All One Broadcast. It's a great family. These people are awesome. I am very happy to have been allowed to bring my show over here from WECK, and all the thanks in the world to Craig Eugene and the folks who run this joint. It allows me to bring really cool guests, like my guest this evening, Mr. Craig Weiler. We're going to be talking about his book for a moment, but an email just came in that I want to jump into because we've been talking about his blog site. It's the WeilerPsiblog.wordpress.com. Carrie writes in at theedgeoftheunknown@gmail.com. I see from your background that you are a psychic that does not charge for your talents. I'd like to know why. I'm a fellow psychic. P.S. I don't charge people either, and I work with many local investigative groups. Carrie, thanks for being on The Edge. Craig, can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, I know I have psychic ability. I'm just I'm not a terribly good psychic. When the whole New Age thing was going full blast, I was into psychic healing. But when it comes to reading people, I don't like it. So I've only done it occasionally for people when something really comes strongly to me, and without charging for it and without making it a commercial enterprise, everything is much more relaxed, and I don't have the pressure of trying to perform, which with psychic ability, that just didn't work for me. You know, I need to be like relaxed in the zone, and the only way this seems to work for me is to not charge any money and only do it if I'm inspired.
It's interesting, and thank you again, Carrie. I want to follow that up with a thought that I had, because, I've been doing this for quite some time. Since I was a kid, I was interested in the paranormal. I've been talking to lots of different people. I've been doing this show for 4 years. Lots of different guests. And one of the things that stands out to me is, in many cases, I look at, the psychics and psychic phenomenon from a skeptical side and say, well, wait a second here. But others are immediately like, well, holy cats, that's really weird. And it wasn't stuff like cold reading or anything that a lot of skeptics will fall back on, that a lot of other people might fall into and just say, oh yeah, that was easy to do because it's easy to ask questions and so on and so forth. But I wanted to ask you, Craig, from your experiences and your abilities, Is it because some people might be a little bit more open to the possibility of psychic phenomenon or the ability to see things a little bit differently, and that way those two people who are having a conversation are in agreement with each other? Or what is it about some people who are like, holy cats, that's dead on, and the other folks are just like, what are you talking about? That has nothing to do with anything.
Okay, this is a whole subject all by itself. So basically, this is the Reader's Digest version. Okay, have you ever heard of the Myers-Briggs Type Index?
Yes.
Okay, so there are personalities, and there's a spread according to this of roughly 16 personalities. Obviously, there's a lot of blending here, but basically, you have some personalities that are what they call sensing thinking. That is to say that they rely on their five senses and they rely on thinking, logical, linear thought type stuff. And then they have other personalities who are more feeling types. They rely on feelings, they rely on intuition, and they tend to be more focused on meaning rather than things. So you have these two different personality types, and the ST types, the more practical types, that makes up about 2/3 of people. And then about 1/3 are these intuitive feeling types. So the psychic ability favors intuitive feeling types. And the reason for this is really fascinating because according to a new book that came out in 2012, it's called First Sight. It's by Dr. James Carpenter. He's a psychologist. And he just nailed this. What he says is that psychic ability is something called first sight. That is, it's the first level of awareness that we have. And normally, during the course of our lives, we're going to use what he referred to as the second sight, which is the normal sensing, feeling, awareness of the world, the, touch it, feel it, see it type stuff. But in situations where ambiguity is present, where you cannot get the answers any other way, that part will suspend for a short time to allow first sight to come through. So as long as we can solve all of our problems in a normal fashion, we are going to do that. But if we have a situation with extended ambiguity or a dangerous situation, then suddenly that area, that part will quiet down and it does not take very long. It could be an instant. Mm-hmm. And the first sight, this ability will come through. So people who are emotionally, psychologically, physiologically tuned to deal well with ambiguity are going to do better psychically than people who are not. The sensible, practical, thinking, sensing people are not going to do well with ambiguity. They don't have a lot of tolerance for it. They want to make decisions. They want things to be very straightforward. But this other crowd, the intuitive feeling type, are comfortable with ambiguity and are willing to withhold judgment until this first sight comes through. So you have people who are definitely better at psychic ability because of that.
Very interesting. There was a number of comments that they want to check out that book. I am going to have to do that too. It sounds very interesting, but I just always have thought of that because, and again, I'm being the skeptic believer that I am. I see a lot of the really famous skeptics, and I immediately am turned off and just say, no, you know what, I'm not buying it. It doesn't fit for me. But some other folks that I know that I've met personally, and I know a number of folks that are on this radio network, and some folks that I just, in everyday life, it's uncanny. There's something very interesting that's happening there that I certainly can't brush off and would never be that foolish to do so. You've got to run into people like that all the time.
Well, certainly on the internet. If you go out in real life, you'll find that almost everybody you run into is okay, somewhat, with psychic ability. The actual people who are really convinced that it doesn't exist are a very small minority. And, you know, everybody I've ever talked to, was it Cynthia? I think it's Cynthia Mossbridge was an excellent example of this. She does a bit of Psi research in addition to her other duties. And she says, you know, I'll give a presentation on this stuff, and everybody will, you know, all these skeptics will come out, and then as soon as the presentation's done, half of them come up to me and they all have stories to relate. So the actual openness to psychic ability it's much more prevalent than skeptics would have you believe. But on the internet, man, you run into them all the time.
Sure.
And I think the reason is because they, first of all, like psychics, they're not a very big community. They can find each other on the web, and that they can get together. And they tend to be types that like organizing and being organized. You see that all over the place with skeptics. Is they're very good organizers, and it tends to be led by people who are very steadfast in their beliefs. And the reason is, based upon some research that's been done, is that they started out having religion crammed down their throats, and they rebelled by retreating into science, which they felt was a much better philosophy.
That's interesting in and of itself. Wow.
Yeah, and that's where your hardcore skeptics come from.
So let's get back to your book, because we haven't even talked about it. We've been on the air for an hour and 20 minutes. Your new book, Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. Talk a little bit about that, and let's also delve into the webinar series that you're going to be offering and you're going to be involved with.
Okay, well, we'll start with the book.
Sure.
But first of all, it's the story of what happened at TED. So I lay out that the whole process of all the stuff that was going on, and how this problem that started out to be relatively easy to fix got drawn out for like a month and a half, with ever increasing drama along the way, until this whole thing basically took over that whole section of the internet and became the big controversy. So I deal with that part. But in order to keep that controversy in context, I had to include material about what kind of people are skeptics, the skeptic organizations, what the science is, how parapsychology is suppressed, basically, in regular sciences. Mm-hmm. And all this background information had to be included in order to give people an idea of the social milieu in which you can have a seemingly sane company like TED behave so strangely. And that was, I think that's really the meat of the book, is there's all this information on the skepticism and how this organized skepticism basically dominates the mass media and dominates the sciences. And really, when you get down to it, this is like talking points. I mean, they're not relying on research, because when you look at the research, it doesn't bear any resemblance to the claims that skeptics make. And you realize this is a political movement. You know, they have their talking points and their ways of dealing with stuff that is more closely matched with political parties and ideologue organizations than anything else. So you have all this background information so that you can understand what TED got caught up in and why they could not back down. Because those are the real questions that drive this whole thing. It's like, why, when they did not have when they had no reasons for taking the videos down, why were they so stubborn about this? And the answer is, they're in the middle of a controversy and they got caught up in it.
Do you think that's because maybe they were getting pulled in different directions by this? You mentioned that they have a board of advisors, a board of directors, whatever you want to call it. Do you think that maybe they were getting pressure from different factions? Is that really where you think it started from?
Well, yes. first of all, it's who did they listen to? Clearly, they had loaded themselves up with skeptics. There were the skeptic bloggers that they listened to, so they respected these skeptical bloggers, and I guess they felt that these people were telling them the truth. And I think that the owner of TED, Chris Anderson, leaned towards skepticism himself, because he certainly had a disproportionate number of atheists working with him, people who leaned towards this particular brand of skepticism. I don't want to say atheists in general, because most atheists are not skeptics, but he had this certain group around him that kind of supported this point of view, and then the science board kind of supported this point of view. And I think when all the stuff hit the fan, that they weren't able to really adjust and say, this isn't working, and maybe we need to rethink this, because everybody around them was totally convinced that they were right.
That's got to be that's got to be the toughest place, because again, what a weird position to be in, because you want to do the right thing and you're not really sure what it is, and you've got a group of people on this side giving you I have this all the time, because I have folks like you on, so the skeptic folks that I know will be like, oh, what does that guy know, blah blah blah, and then I'll have a skeptic on, and I've got the other people saying, those guys are idiots, what are you doing, you can't be affiliated with them. But there's got to be and I might actually, this is actually going to be better, because somebody actually wrote in, hang on, I'm going to go back to an email before I pretend that this is my question. Hang on one second. This is the Edge of the Unknown, excuse me, at gmail.com, the Edge of the Unknown at gmail.com. Evan, here we go. Evan in Webster writes in a perfect world, what would you like to see happen between the hardcore skeptics and those who have a stronger belief in non-scientific paranormal? Can there be a compromise, or is that out of the question? Evan, thanks. That's exactly what I was going to say. That's probably why I had that planted in my head.
The answer is no. You cannot reason with the hardcore skeptics. What you have to do with this particular thing is simply keep opening up the debate. The hardcore skeptics are not going to change until absolutely everybody has already moved past them. What's happening now, and we're right in the middle of this controversy, is that the skeptics are losing the middle ground. So all the reasonable people are abandoning the skeptics. It's a very slow process, of course. This is science, and this is a really, really big change, so this is going to happen really slowly. But the skeptics are losing the middle ground, and more reasonable people are abandoning them, until eventually the reasonable people outnumber them to such an enormous degree that the skeptics are no longer important. So people simply stop paying attention to them. They continue beating their drum, but nobody pays them any attention, and that's eventually where we're going to end up with this. It's a little bit like, I guess, global warming denial, where for a while there was a bit of debate about this, but eventually reasonable people moved in a certain direction, and there are still lots of skeptics, and they're still making lots of noise, but nobody takes them seriously. And that's kind of where we're headed.
From the chat room, I'm going to cruise back up here. This is an interesting comment from Dave, Dave S. There will always be skeptics. We know that. You'll never change people's minds on their belief system. It just won't happen. Which is true, but doesn't the same thing apply to the believers, or the folks who do have an interest in the paranormal?
That is an excellent question. And this really gets to the heart of what we're dealing with. Because on the one hand, you're dealing with skeptics who are operating on beliefs, and you're dealing with another group that everybody seems to think that they're operating on beliefs, but they're actually operating on experiences. These are much different things. A person operating on experience deals with the situation differently. For example, with me, when it comes to why I say I'm psychic, is because I simply had enough experiences that were not explainable any other way. It simply wore me down, and wore down my skepticism and wore down my resistance until I until finally, yeah, I get it. Okay, I'm psychic. Yeah, I get it now. And a lot of people who don't grow up with it end up figuring it out that way. Is basically they end up with enough experiences that they're convinced by them. This is much different from, ironically, they get labeled believers, but they're actually experiencers. And you can tell the difference because when you ask them, do you believe in psychic ability, it'll be, well, I guess so. But in reality, it's like, do you believe in trees? You're going to have the same response. I guess so. Yeah, they're there. An experience is something that you can't be moved from. Once you've had an experience, you're not going to deny it. So you don't see people who are experiencers moving away from that position, but you do see skeptics moving away from their belief in skepticism.
Well, I believe in swordfish. Okay, there's a Dead Milkmen reference for everybody. There's the music quota for the evening. I mentioned it. Okay, never mind. I'm sure that nobody out there even remembers who the Dead Milkmen were, but they were a great band. So anyway, I was, when you're asking that question, do you believe in psychic ability? The first thing that comes out of my mouth is, why not? Now, coupled with what I already mentioned before, is it necessarily the Long Island woman or Sylvia Brown or any of that stuff? I'm going to tend to say I'm not really buying that, but at the same time, I'm certainly not going to shut my mind off to thinking that somebody else might have psychic ability because, like I said, I run into people all the time. It's uncanny, and if you were immediately going to say no, then why even bother talking at all? Shouldn't you just go on with your life and not worry about everybody else who does want to talk about it?
I'm on a forum, the Skeptical Forum with Alex Tsoukalos, and this question comes up occasionally because of the kinds of skeptics that join the forum. It's like, why are they bothering? Why do they care? Why is it so important to them that they tell everybody that psychic ability doesn't exist? What's in it for them? And the answer is nobody really knows. It seems to be an ideologue thing where people just, they feel like they need to convert us or something. I really don't, I'm psychoanalyzing from a distance, take that for what it is.
So before we take a break, I've got to make up one break, and I apologize for that because I played the wrong one before. Let's talk about this really interesting webinar series you've got.
Oh, sure. So I'm working with David Metcalf at this is Evolver. They're part of the Reality Sandwich people, and we have a series of awesome webinars. If you want to join it live, it's about I think about $120. I can't remember exactly. It's but it's on the Evolver Learning Lab, EVOLVER, Evolver Learning Labs. And so we have some great guests. One of them is Jim Carpenter. This was the person I mentioned earlier that did the book First Sight about the this theory of psi, that it's actually the first awareness that we have. So he's going to be our first guest. Then we have Julie Beischel. She is co-founder and director of research at the Windbridge Institute, and they work. They do studies on mediumship and the therapeutic value of mediumship and mysteries of discarnate communication. They're looking into all that as scientists. So she's PhD scientists and this sort of thing. I also have Dan Booth Cohen and Emily Bolden. They are pioneers of systemic constellations. This is a really, really cool therapy method. I stumbled upon it because Dan came to one of the forums that I was on. I had a look at this, and it blew me away. Because what they're saying in this is that because of the nature of reality, which is basically timeless and spaceless, and that's not up for debate, that's regular quantum physics, that we are not only affected by ourselves, but also we can have ancestors that whatever happened to them or what they were doing can still be affecting us today. You can have trauma, for example, passed down through generations. Very interesting. It's systemic constellations. We also have Chris Carter on, and he was one of the first authors that I ran into when I was investigating psychic ability, and he's a pioneer of going after and detailing all the skeptical arguments and why they fail to explain the evidence. And, for example, one of his books is Science and Psychic Phenomena, The Fall of the House of Skeptics. Very good author. His books are very clear. And also, we're going to have William Bankston, and he wrote a book called The Energy Cure. And one of the fascinating things about this guy is he did, this is going to blow you away. I mean, really blow you away. He did psychic healing research on mice. They gave the mice a type of mammary cancer, and this particular strain of mouse has no immunity to this disease whatsoever. This is just a regular science. These mice are used in all kinds of science experiments. There's nothing special. And so he experimented on psychic healing, but here's the kicker. They used skeptics as some of the healers, and their heal rate for this 100% fatal cancer was 85%.
Huh. That's really interesting. What did they say when they found that out? Did they have any follow-up commentary discussion?
They did more experiments, just like any good scientist would. And then he went. He published this in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, because something like that isn't going to be published anyplace else. And then he's taken his show on the road and given presentations and said, "Hey, try and break this. What did I do wrong with my study?" Nobody can find a problem with it, but it meets with the same stony silence as all other parapsychology research. But it's 85%. Not only that, but they tried to re-inject these mice with the cancer, and they were immune. So they cure them, and then they give them these injections of the cancer all over again that they supposedly have no immunity to, and it wouldn't take. So it's like 85% healing on this rapid cancer. Holy smokes!
That's really weird. Hey, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's William Bankston, and then I'm going to have one webinar with my co-host for all of this, David Metcalf, and we're going to go over some of the stuff that I've been looking into. So that's my webinars. They're going to be really exciting. I mean, I picked some. All these people are scientists or PhDs. They except for Chris Carter, but he's also published in scientific. He's also published scientific papers. So these people are real skeptics in the true sense of the word, and they follow this part of it, which I'm totally down with. I love that.
My guest here this evening on the Edge of the Unknown, Craig Weiler. Check out his book that we just talked about, Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. You can find that as a Kindle ebook. You can also find that on Amazon.com. Check out his blog. Very, very interesting. Lots of great commentary there. WeilerPsiblog.wordpress.com. We're going to take a fast break here and come back. I've got a couple of more comments that have come through the email account at theedgeoftheunknown@gmail.com. Very lively conversation going on over in the live chat room, but obviously first things first, my guest comes there. I'm going to go during this break and check some of that commentary out. I want to remind everybody about a lot of cool shows coming up in the next few weeks. Winter Lake will be on with me, if you're familiar with him being a psychic and one of the most outspoken Satanists. He's also an expert on the occult. He's going to be joining me, as well as Dr. Joyce Michael Flynn, talking about NDEs and metahabilitation for those who have undergone such a traumatic experience, as well as members from the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. Ron Bowles will be on board, and I'm just waiting for whoever else might be joining him in a future show coming up here at the end of January, early February. And, of course, Mr. Thomas Fusco, author of Behind the Cosmic Veil. Thomas and I have made an agreement to speak at least once every 3 or 4 months. He's going to be coming on in the month of February. Much more coming up with my guest, Craig Weiler, this evening, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for hanging out with me late on a Sunday night. My name is Mark. This is The Edge of the Unknown on the All One Broadcast Radio Network.
Hey everybody, This is medium Julie MacDonald for All One Broadcast, the best station for paranormal and all things spirit. At A1B, there are no canned, pre-recorded shows. Join us and interact with our hosts in our live chat room. Ask questions. Get answers. All fresh, all live, all the time. Join us at A1B, the only place to be.
Looking for the best in vintage clothing? Look no further than Vintage Wears Boutique at vintagewearsboutique.com. Women's classic jackets and coats, skirts and dresses, all just a click away. Check out the latest inventory online for pictures, sizing, and more. Have a particular item in mind you can't find anywhere else? Go to vintagewearsboutique.com. Still stumped? Try their personal shopper service and let them do the work. Find the best in vintage clothing at vintagewearsboutique.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us at vintagewears_ on Twitter, and see us on Pinterest and Tumblr. vintagewearsboutique.com, where the past is your style.
Hi everyone, Mark Henry here from the Edge of the Unknown, coming at you every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. here on the All One Broadcast Radio Network. Each week I'll bring you great guests from the world of the strange, the unexplained, and the paranormal for great talk and discussion, but I want you to be a part of it too. Share your experiences and stories by calling 716-393-9525, email theedgeoftheunknown at gmail.com, shoot me a message on Facebook, just look for the Edge of the Unknown radio show, or tweet me at EdgeTheUnknown. Coming up this Sunday, January 12th, esoteric numerologist Elizabeth Summers will be my guest, talking about the history of numerology, how it plays out in our lives. Do the numbers really mean something? Can we actually predict the future? We're going to talk about that and much, much more. Hope to see you there. So join me, Mark Henry, each and every Sunday evening from 8 to 10 on the Edge of the Unknown, only on the All One Broadcast Radio Network.
What's that? Who's there? I don't know. But this here is Mark Henry, and you're listening to The Edge of the Unknown.
Hey, Mark Henry, that is me. Wow, I better get back to work. My guest this evening here on The Edge of the Unknown, Craig Weiler. Check out his blog, WordPress.com site, Weiler Psi blog. Lots of interesting information. If you missed any of this show, please download it at the on-demand page at all1broadcast.com. You can also find it on iTunes. I will have it up as fast as I can after this show. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. We've got another segment to go here, and if you've got any questions, feel free to get on board via the chat room at the all1broadcast.com website, 716-393-9523. Quiet phones tonight, but that's okay. The Edge of the Unknown at gmail.com, and always you can find me on Facebook, Edge of the Unknown Radio Show. Like the page, shoot me a message, and we will go from there. Appreciate everybody who has participated this evening. Again, a very lively chat in the chat room. Not necessarily what we're talking about tonight, but something that we can probably tackle. There's a lot of alien conversation going on in the chat room right now. Craig, can you imagine why that would be? We haven't really touched on that, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But hey, I can't stop them and let them have fun, right?
Yeah, I'm in the parapsychology community, and the alien stuff does come up every now and then. It's kind of a different crowd. It's not really the stuff that I run with, but I check in on it occasionally. But there's a lot of crossover.
Sure.
So I can understand why people get into that.
Heck, I found a lot of crossover with, like I said, I'm going to have some guys on from the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. I'm not a big fan of their show, the Finding Bigfoot or whatever it is. I'm not a big TV show guy at all, but really cool guys that are, again, boots to the ground, out in the field. But there's a lot of talk on their Facebook page, I noticed lately, about Bigfoot and aliens. I guess there's probably a lot of crossover in all of the paranormal.
Well, Bigfoot recently had a really huge controversy, and this is like totally off topic, but I did some research on this and posted a blog on it because it had to do with skeptical hatchet jobs, which is definitely up my alley. The Big Fit community recently had a 5-year study completed. They out of this where they collected samples in the wilderness, and out of these samples, I think they got like 113. 3 of them had the complete genomes. They passed this off to a geneticist, Melba Ketchum in Texas. She wrote up a paper. She did the whole blasting and sequencing and stuff, and sent a paper into Nature. Somebody leaked the peer reviews. Nature eventually declined to publish. She got somebody else to publish. Then they yanked it at the last moment, and so she put the whole thing on her site instead, bought the journal that she had that peer review from, just so that she could publish the information, and then got blasted by skeptics for doing so, when really all she's doing is just sharing everything she's got, plus the peer reviews that she got from the last place she submitted, because she didn't feel like continuing to submit something. She didn't have any confidence anybody would take it. And the reasons for this are unknown, because there's so much controversy surrounding that and psychic stuff and all that kind of thing that you don't know. You can't get anything. You can't get objective, ordinary scientific reviews of this stuff. People won't touch it. And so that's where it sits. They've got this study sort of, and it shows Bigfoot is half human, and it's really kind of weird.
Well, it's all kind of weird. We're all kind of weird, but you know what? We can at least have a fun discussion and be civil about it, which leads me to this interesting email, theedgeoftheunknown@gmail.com. And remember, if you've got somebody that you would like to hear on this radio program, please feel free to shoot me an email at any time. I respond to all of them, even the ones who, tell me that they don't like me and my show sucks. I will still respond to you. As a matter of fact, someone who wanted to hear Craig Weiler actually reached out and said, hey, you should have this guy on, and here we are. So I am a man of my word, and I will always take every consideration for anybody who wants to hear someone on the show. And we're probably going to be moving back to the 3-hour format. I'm still working that out. I've actually got to talk to the powers that be here. They've given me the permission to do it, but I'm just I'm kind of feeling that one out. I think I might start doing that in 2 weeks, but we'll get to that when we get to that. 8 to 11 as opposed to 8 to 10, but that's coming up down the road. Anyway, Melanie writes in, and this is obviously directed straight to you, Craig. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for standing up for some principles without being a expletive about it. There are people out there that can disagree, and I think that's great, but all the expletive they throw around is not productive. It's insulting. Flying spaghetti monster, woo, idiots, morons, stupid fools, hardly the talk of scientists, hardly the talk of the learned. It is the talk of rude, uncultured buffoons. Thanks for being one of the good ones. Melanie, appreciate you writing in. I had to pass that along.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I've seen all types with the skeptics, and what I've learned to do, as I mentioned earlier, is you have to judge each person as they come. Some people are totally off the deep end, and others can be quite reasonable. You just, you have to reserve judgment. You can't be labeling people right off the bat.
And I think, honestly, there's probably a lot of that talk based on, some of the things that you've already talked about, where instead of it being, hey, I disagree, or, let's sit down and let's measure out the facts, let's talk about this, it does kind of get to that point. And number one, it's got to be frustrating for the people that they are going after, but it also, in a way, has to be frustrating for them, because as much as a lot of a lot of the skeptics I know say, we don't care, it's interesting to know that they keep saying the same things over and over, the same way the other side does. There's got to be a point where people just say, okay, I get it, I'm not going to say it anymore. And that is not to say that any of my skeptic friends should stop talking. And that is not to say any of my true believer friends should stop talking. But there's got to be a point where everybody just says, okay, I get it, I disagree with you, and then move on and do something else.
Well, for my part, if I'm engaged with the skeptic, I will take it as far as it will go. But if I think I'm running into something hardcore, I just back out of the conversation. I have absolutely no interest in trying to convince anybody of anything. If I can share some information, great. But if they're not open to it, well, I don't need to convince them. it's not my job in this universe.
I think that actually kind of comes full circle with what we first started talking about, where there are skeptics who do the same thing, where they're like, okay, look, this person believes something I don't. I'm going to back off. I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to get involved in this. And then there's the others, like you say, I guess maybe I'm going to start using that term, hardcore skeptic, where they're just, it becomes a point where it's no longer a discussion. It's just kind of ugly. And, well, anyway, I don't even want to go down that road again. But, well, with the time we have left, obviously, we talked a little bit about this webinar series coming up. Let's mention to everybody again where they can sign up for that.
This is on the website. Reality Sandwich has a portion that they devote to classes, and that portion is called Evolver, EVOLVER, Evolver Learning Labs. And so this is an Evolver Learning Lab course. And the name of it is Everybody's Psychic. And we have 6 guests, all scientists. 5 guests, 4 of whom are scientists, and one is published scientific papers. We're discussing these the psychic stuff from the point of view of real evidence, as opposed to I hate this term, but unicorns and rainbows.
So anybody is free to sign up for that. They can do it at whenever they want to and participate. There's no requirements to actually be involved with that. That's great.
Yeah. Anybody can sign up for these shows. They are, I think it's about 100 or 120. I can't remember exactly which. To sign up to be part of it. But then, of course, once you sign up for, you're in there, you can actually have conversations with the people who are running it. So you're a participant rather than simply a passive listener.
I've got one more question I think we've got time to delve into here because, again, this sounds like something that you've been dealing with, and I'm just going to throw the name and let you think for a second. Susan Gerbic. I think we should talk a little bit about that, but I do want to make one thing clear. Actually, someone wrote to a local skeptic group. I mentioned earlier that I listened to their podcast. Someone actually wrote and attacked me through them. And they stood up for me knowing that we don't agree on a lot of things, knowing that we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. I was really appreciative of the fact that they said, hey, Mark does what he does. He's good at it. He has lots of different guests on. That's the way I like to see people interacting because I've had them on the show in the past. And we have disagreed on things, and we don't always agree on everything. That's the kind of discourse I like to have here on the Edge of the Unknown. So kudos to them. I wanted to just give them the shout out to One Step Beyond Skeptical Research. Someone attacked me and another member of the Western New York paranormal field, and you know what, I appreciate them saying, hey, that has nothing to do with us. They're good people. The same way, I mean, look, anybody can say what they want. I will never stop them from doing that because it's their God-given right to. I might not agree with it, but thanks to them. Anyway, let's get back to Susan Gerbic. Not totally familiar with what's going on there. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it in the time that we have left.
Oh, sure. So I really don't know exactly what she's up to. First of all, Susan Gerbic runs the Guerrilla Skeptics on Wikipedia. They are an organization of skeptics that edit Wikipedia. The part that nobody really knows outside of them is exactly what they're up to. They have a public presence, which is very benign. The editors go and improve articles that have to do with skeptic organizations and skeptics and basically try to make them look good, which, no problem there. However, in a training video that she did some time back, if you watch the video, you can see the mentality of this organization, which is kind of we're out to get them kind of theme running there. So they're trying to make psychics look bad. They've, of course, going after Sylvia Brown, that's their holy grail of skeptical attacks.
Why would you even bother now? She's dead. What's the point?
I don't know if they're still going after her now that she's dead. But,
right.
Oh my gosh, the entire time I've been involved with this, they have been going after her constantly. I guess she's just an easy punch. I guess she was just an easy punching bag. I don't know. She was highly visible. Somebody who obviously wasn't perfect, and never attacked back really. So very, very easy target for the skeptics to go after.
Sure.
So anyway, they have this organization, Guerrilla Skeptics. They organize and operate on secret Facebook pages. You have to be invited in. They don't take just anybody. And I'm sure they're vetting people before they are invited into the organization. They claim to have about 90 editors. They work in several different languages. And that's about all I know about them.
Were they involved with any of the stuff that we talked about earlier about the Rational Wiki or whatever that was?
Nobody knows. There's no way. If they're doing if they're doing underhanded stuff, they're hiding it really well. There's no way to know for sure. Because you need an entire list. They need to be a completely open organization for anybody to know exactly what was going on with them, and they're not.
You'd think, honestly, in all honesty, somebody actually asked a question, Mark asked a question, would you rather have a question on the chat room or would you rather send that to, a personal page or whatever? And I'm like, no, to ask it here. It's transparency. I would think that anybody who wants anybody to be swayed to their side of thinking would want to be totally transparent. Why would you hide? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't think they want to be totally transparent, and that's actually fairly typical. Skeptics, mind you, I'm not talking about like your generic skeptic, but these people that are really focused on being skeptics, that we're going to go with the word hardcore again, they tend to have the mentality that you should just believe them because they say so. And I see that a lot. It seems to be a personality trait that there's this arrogance, and they tend to be somewhat angry. And they don't really see the need for full disclosure because they only tend to see things from their point of view.
Well, all that we can do between you and I is to not be angry. We can at least say, hey, we had a fun time on the show. I hope you did. I've got to wrap things up. Did you enjoy yourself? I hope you did.
I had a wonderful time. I had just a blast. Thank you very much,
Excellent.
Mark.
Thanks so much. Let's do this again. I'm going to throw you on hold here. Hang on 1 second. Everybody else,
Okay.
I appreciate you being on the Edge of the Unknown each and every Sunday night. Next week, numerologist Elizabeth Summers. And remember, when you've stopped questioning, you've stopped thinking. My thanks to Craig Weiler, WeilerPsiblog.wordpress.com. See you next week. Have a great one, everybody.